To our, all right. Welcome everyone to our literacy journey. We're glad that you're here today. I know this is high in our minds, the READ Act. How do we navigate it? What does that look like in our schools? We know that all of our schools are a little bit different, and that could look different in different settings. And so I'm excited today to have two principals who have been working on a lot of the components of the READ Act before the READ Act came about. So they have been committed to literacy within their buildings and ensuring that all of their teachers get the training necessary and the right resources so that they can provide the best opportunities for students. And so I'm really excited today to introduce you to Maura Wyant. She is the principal at Edgerton Elementary in the Roseville area schools. And there's Mara and Jennifer Taylor. She is the principal at United South Central Elementary in Wells. And so it's great because we have both a rural Minnesota or outstate Minnesota perspective, as well as a more of a metro perspective. And so I'm excited to turn it over to Jennifer and Maura.
Thank you, Michelle, for organizing for all of us as principals so we can learn together. It's my favorite part about MESPA. I promise I am getting just as much out of this as other people are learning from us too. And it's really helpful to all of you putting things in the chat. So I'm seeing a ton about the READ Act timeline. And so I want to throw in at the end more specifics about, they do have an updated PDF. So I can't get that in the slideshow right now, but we'll do that. I think the other common question I'm hearing is just navigating the challenges. So we will, Jennifer and I will both go through that. We've had very different experiences, but also some similar ones. And I think the biggest thing on like the timeline is just get going with training your teachers. And training your teachers is the hardest part, primarily because of time, and then also because we are in the business of adult emotions, and there are a lot of emotions with this. So we will touch on those things. Jennifer and I can also both put our email in the chat at the end. I'll continue to put the slides in here so you have our information. If you want to follow up, please reach out to us. I love talking about this stuff. So Jennifer, do you want to say anything? Jump in here too to start?
No, I was just going to say likewise, please reach out to me if you have any questions.
Awesome. I think the most important thing, we'll go through like the why and the how and some specifics, being grounded in our why. It's a cliche word in education at this point, but it really is what has helped guide through this significant change in teacher practices and how we're implementing reading instruction for all kids. And I am very grateful that I've been part of Roseville area schools that has been really clear that learning to read is a social justice issue of our time. And that has, because we have a strong equity policy and expectation and teachers and educators leaning into that, when pushback has come up or that reverting to past practices, we've been able to hold each other accountable, reminding ourselves of our why.
And I would say at USC, our big why is that this is the great equalizer among our students. We noticed very early on when I took this position 3 years ago that there was a huge disparity in students' ability to read. We were able to, I spearheaded the mission to grab ESSER money because it was needed to benefit all students. So we felt like that would be one great way that we could bring equity to our school and social justice. So we started with, I poured through data and I really saw the need for foundational reading skills, that something was missing in our teaching methods, I would say our tier 1 methods. And so I presented the option to take letters. Staff was very curious and willing to jump in to do what was best for kids.
I'm clicking along. Here we go, Jennifer.
Sure, no, that's great. So one thing also I would say at USC is our student assistance team. I recognized very early on that we were over identifying sped students, specifically in the tier one or in the SLD category. So that to me looked like it was a tier one issue. Um, and so we really, really looked at that piece. What was our curriculum and what was our teaching and instruction looking like at the tier one level where everybody gets it? At that time, MDE was offering letters for a select few that were willing to join and get on. I was not lucky enough to be one of those people. But that's why I started to venture out and look at this as a possibility for our school. The one really quote that caught me by kind of surprise was research shows that only 35% of students are reading proficiently, but 95% of students can learn to read when instruction is based on the science of reading. And so that is one of the big reasons why I really kind of jumped on the letters bandwagon. So my big how and how I started going through this process was my letters contact was Katie Lewis. There's a picture of Katie and I there at the MESPA conference. She is absolutely wonderful. If you need to reach out to her for anything. Um, we kind of did things differently. I wanted my staff to go through letters as a large group. I wanted everybody in the same room so that it would foster better communication and collaboration as well. So we pulled in a huge big screen TV, and then I had each one of my staff on each of their individualized laptops, and that's how we took this process over for the last 2 years. You got to make this fun when your staff goes through this. It is long. And like Maura said, the big piece of this is getting through the training. That's a big significant chunk of this. So we decided to make it fun and we organized food by teams. We knew we had to do some of that because this was quite the process. So I wanted to throw in the United South Central literacy blocks in here. We also, the one thing that we learned very quickly going through letters was that we needed to have a 120-minute reading block. We did not at the time have a 120-minute reading block. From our learnings as well, I really feel like the letters gave us the why behind the how. So for us to implement that how, we knew we had to get explicit phonics instruction into our school. And we opted to go for UFly. We also partnered with Lexia to do Core 5 is another one of their programs that we are able to utilize. We get a lot of data out of Core 5 that is practicing the skills that the kids learn. We also jumped in and did our decodable passages, reader, practice, comprehension. And then we're doing 20 to 30 minutes of win time where students are ability grouped based on diagnostic interventions. We pull in all of our SPED, ELL, title, and our reading core into this time period to really get kids what they need at their level. And I do stress this, we utilize the same learning targets. So we're all working on the same thing during that time, just at different levels. And right now, our curriculum, we have HMH into reading. I don't know that that's going to be something that the state is going to approve. So we're kind of in a holding pattern over that. But UFly is our phonics curriculum. We've had a lot of luck with the UFly. The kids really enjoy it. Our teachers like it. So that's where our literacy block is at this time.
Jennifer, someone asked, is Katie from Letters? Can you just give a little more context on who she is?
Okay, so Katie, she is the Minnesota rep for public schools. There's also a gal, and I can't think of what her name is. She works more with like the charter schools, but Katie is the public school person that you can get in contact with. And I think when you initially put in your email or however it is you're contacting them, ask for Katie Lewis. She is phenomenal. She is outstanding. I believe she's stationed in Arizona, but she comes here for all the MESPA institutes and she will get back to you, and it's just the red carpet treatment.
I think, is she employed by Lexia?
She is. Yep. She is a
Okay.
Lexia employee, a former teacher and
Okay.
interventionist.
And so then the blocks, the schedule at Edgerton in some ways are very similar. Since there were some questions about curriculum and timeline, I'm kind of going to shift and say, like Jennifer mentioned, some of our curriculums we've chosen are on the approved list and some are on the waiting to be approved. We did adopt Wit and Wisdom. It's a knowledge-based curriculum for K-6 in Roseville this year, and that has been on the approved list, and there have been challenges with it. Edgerton specifically has a very high percentage of MLL students, and teachers are making significant modifications to scaffold language and provide more visuals. That was one of the downfalls we've seen in the curriculum, and Wit and Wisdom is aware of that, and they are working on a rewrite that will be updated. They have said next year or the following year. Then we didn't go with UFly. We're doing Foundations and Heggerty, and those are both on the need to be resubmitted list. And my understanding is that the publishing companies are doing the work that MDE is required. And I think I'm taking the attitude, and maybe this is wrong, maybe wrong approach, but I'm going with anything that the READ Act has originally said, then they've come back with some modifications or, okay, well, we're saying this, but now we're hearing from people. And so there has been some flexibility. So district leaders, and from what I've heard, we're pretty confident that we're going to be okay with Foundations and Heggerty. For sure, we're going to continue with it for next year. But very similar, we increased the time allocated in our school-wide schedule to literacy. So I think when you're planning, to be aware of that. And also just overall, when you increase literacy, what are you taking away? We started MCAs here yesterday. I am prepared to see a dip in math MCAs because we have been so focused on literacy this year. And while we didn't decrease our math time, we did from our social studies and science. Something's got to give. The other thing I want to speak to is Jennifer. It's very impressive what her and her team did through letters. And while letters is the gold standard, and I myself went through the training and have heard from multiple teachers here and in St. Paul and across the state who have engaged in it, that it's the best PD they've ever taken. With that said, it is incredibly time consuming and expensive. And the reality is, with the timeline of the READ Act, I know that not all districts are going to be able to train all teachers. Is it recommended? Absolutely. But if you are the person that is making these decisions and thinking there's no way I can in the next 2 years, we have to have something started next year. You don't have to have everyone fully trained next year, but you have to start. And we also need a plan for new hires. I just wanted to throw out here the other options. In Roseville, what we did is K4 or pre-K4 teachers are letters trained, all SPED, all MLL. Now we're looking into, we were going to start 5-6 in letters, and now we're looking at pausing that and possibly doing carry-all, just because of the knowledge needed at those levels. And I mean, there's only so much time. This is it becomes a contract issue as well. The other thing I highly recommend when we're talking about adult learning, because that is, in order to get different outcomes for kids, we have to start with the adults. And so many feelings. There's just a lot of feelings. And it's because teachers love what they do. And these are some of the resources and the process we went through in Roseville to so we really understood the science. I mean, we have to be learners alongside the teachers. And such good conversations have come out of The Knowledge Gap is a great book, really, really good podcast. I know Sold a Story has kind of gotten controversial since it first came out, but I still highly recommend if you have not, or sharing this with staff. It really helps with that, any sort of resistance to changes that you're going to be putting in place.
I was going to say, I also saw that Sold a Story has 2 more episodes that are a follow-up that just came out recently, so that might be something too to check out. So I think when we talk about doing the big shift and the time commitment it takes, we really have to look at the adult learner. And that is not always easy. People are really feel strapped for time. A lot of time, these trainings come outside of our regular clock hours. So when we initially started this process, I kind of put it out to staff that if they did letters, that they would earn 12 graduate credits with the possibility to get a master's degree. So I would say our first year, people were like, "Oh my goodness." By our second year now, we only have 1 more class to take before my staff is done. I have 7 people that are going on now to get their master's degree through the university that grants you the 12 credits once you're done with it. The other thing I really looked at was how vulnerable people would be having to go back and do this. Essentially, for some people, they were learning everything all new again. And I felt like there was going to be safety in numbers, which is why we did the big, large group in our media center. This really was a shift in teaching. What we were doing was not what was best for kids. And I think that was hard to swallow. That was hard for me to swallow as we sort of uncovered everything throughout the course of our learning. We knew that we could not continue doing some things that we were doing because it was not working. And that's why we were seeing the data that we were seeing. I would also say this process has challenged us and given us another opportunity, not only to collaborate, but our PLC work has much more deep rooted meanings now based upon the knowledge we've gained. Also, a big piece of the adult learning is also being the leader of the school. And one thing that I realized very quickly was that I could not tell my staff to do this without doing it myself. And so, as an administrator, the past 2 years, I have completed letters for administrators, which is really just an overview of all of the programs that they are offering, the teachings and the learnings. I also did letters for early childhood with the early childhood team, and I have attended every single letters training with elementary staff for the past 2 years. The trainings are 3 hours per month, and it really is a significant time commitment, but I would really recommend doing it because it shows that you're in it with them and you're learning and growing together. So interestingly enough, at our school, we have all of our elementary teachers, with the exception of 3 special ed teachers, trained. We have paras trained. We have 2 speech language pathologists that trained, all of my Title I staff and paraprofessionals trained. And then my elementary administrative assistant is also trained, and she sometimes meets with maybe 1 or 2 kids during the day when she has some downtime in the office.
So that means like your secretary is trained in letters.
Yep, correct. Yep,
That's
she is
very
trained. Yeah, yeah. So it's we really just we cast a wide net, and I'm very proud of the work that the staff has done to this point. Again, I think as an administrator, you really have to lead by example. We were lucky enough to be able to get a stipend for teachers at that, so they get a stipend when they finish at the end of each year. And also, we learned very quickly this year that you had to note if you were going to have staff members go through training, because it was going to be a significant increase to get your staff trained beyond this year. And so both of my speech language pathologists stepped up to do, they are now letters trainers, and we will do that for incoming teachers. And we still have 3 special ed staff that need to go through.
So how did you pay for this? How did the people that are non-licensed, like thinking paras, secretary, like when did they do this during the day? Like what funding did you use to pay?
So we used ESSER funding for the letters, and we used staff development funds for stipend to pay. We were able to take some of our Title II money as well to do stipends for this. Interestingly enough, I had to sit down and really look at the calendar. Any of our early outs or our all-day staff developments is where I put letters. So like if we had a 2-hour early out, staff starts letters, and then they only have to put in an additional 1 hour of their time at the end of that day. So that was a pretty tricky piece. I felt like I spent a significant chunk of the summer on that.
Yeah. And thank you to those putting questions in the chat, because that, like, I'm blown away by this. Like, wow, this is impressive. And then the next one is you provided grad credits and stipends. Did people get a choice or did they receive both?
They receive both. So the one thing is you go through letters, they offer the 12 grad credits, but you have to apply for that through the American University. And it's a very low cost to get the credits. I can't remember. I feel like it's like right around $500 or so. I might be too low in that. But you pay for the grad credits once you complete letters. And that's how you then earn those credits, and they will send you your transcript.
Yeah. From what I have heard, I think that's really unique to the ability to do both. If anything, when we met last week, someone brought this up, and I've heard similar things of people that, like, the early adopters, people who went into the MDE credit or the cohort, not credit, I'm sorry, and were doing letters out of their own just growth mindset and wanting to understand. And now we're coming in with this as the READ Act, and people are getting stipends. That's created some conflict and just culture problems for districts that we didn't anticipate this coming. So we definitely, like, it was a choice for people to do grad credits. And then in Roseville, and this is a shift too, you have to think about what's your PD calendar like? I am new to Roseville. This is my second year coming from St. Paul, where we had 2 professional development days a year for educators. And now in Roseville, we have 6. That's a huge difference in how much time you can allocate on a PD calendar to letters. And all 6 of them have been ELA and letters this year, and next year are 4 out of the 6 days. So it's a significant amount of time that you're dedicating to training teachers.
I just wanted to thank Christine for putting Katie Lewis's information in and her phone number, and to Evan it's the American College of Excellence letters credits. There is a link also on there. And this is my team. I had them stay after in the media center, one of our training days, and I snapped a picture of all of them. So, see.
To Josh, the question of what did staff do that are not going through the training. So we are implementing a new curriculum. And so, like, our 5, 6 teachers were working on wit and wisdom planning and PD while everyone else was doing letters. So that's something to think about. And we're kind of in a stuck spot right now about we are not stuck, just problem solving is the positive way to say that, of what we will do with all the new hires next year. As a lot of people are finishing letters, some will be just starting. And so the PD calendar is going to get tricky. And in a district our size, we have 9 elementaries, who's doing what and who's helping and facilitating which parts.
I know at United South Central, when staff were going through the letters training, our staff that did not, like our PE teachers, our art teachers, and they were able to join the professional development that was going on at the high school at that time. So that's how we kind of broke ours up.
Mhm. Moving on, like, I'm not gonna say much about this because it doesn't seem like these are the questions, because it really, I think more framing this of like why we're doing this with staff rather than, well, we're doing it because the state has to. Like, yes, the questions are about MDE and the READ Act and the timeline. And also we're talking to staff about that. Yeah, we were doing some things wrong and it wasn't reaching all kids. And now that we've made some changes, it's working. And so, not that anyone wants to do a deep dive into another school's data, but I do want to point out that, like, from a curriculum implementation standpoint, to anticipate a dip in the beginning, because teachers are the learners as well. And they're not only learning new things, they're unlearning old things. I wish I would have framed this better for staff this fall to predict this dip in scores to the winter, because what I could have prevented, and this is why I'm sharing it with all of you, is the panic that they see when they see their scores going down, which hadn't happened in the past, and that want to go back to what we had been doing rather than staying the course and we know this is the right thing. And that many of us use FastBridge, and FastBridge does not align with some of the new curriculums being used. And so you are going to see a dip, but then luckily we've seen that jump again now this spring.
So we don't have our final STAR data for this year to really kind of compare. I will say that we have taken our quarterly STAR data and we've really used that in our student assistance team. One thing that I just wanted to show you too here is I talked about how we're using Lexia Core 5 and Power Up. If you notice on this, it goes horizontally. So starting in September, if you see, like, we'll look at the first box of kindergarten in September in the upper left-hand corner. We started out the beginning of the year last year with 49% of our kids at or above grade level. This year, if you can see, it's 88% in September. For first grade last year, we started out at 23% of our students at or above grade level. This year, we started with 61% of our students at or above grade level. One thing that we're seeing is we push this down, as I stated earlier, our early childhood team went through letters training. They're now using Core 5. They're also using the secret stories in preschool. This year, the big push that they've made, we actually only had one kindergarten student that needed reading core at the beginning of the year. So that's really been impressive for us. We're also seeing through this that I have some students that are English language learners. I had a student that was only in our school for 5 weeks during the day when we had the legislatures in the schools across the state of Minnesota. Michelle Krell was able to come to United South Central and sit in on a lesson in one of my kindergarten classes. And this student had just come from Honduras, and she had been in the district probably about 5 weeks. And during that lesson, Michelle was able to witness her going through U-Fly and actually hearing the sounds of the letters and being able to write them down on the whiteboard. So that's been pretty cool for us to see the big jumps and the big gains that we're seeing.
And I would echo that, I have been really impressed this year with how quickly you see it working for students that might have limited school experience. We have a similar student, recently arrived family, had been here 3 weeks, and within 2 weeks, because of strong tier 1 and that repetition, which I'm a former kindergarten teacher, is almost the exact opposite of what I was being told to do. And after 2 weeks of him being in 2nd grade, he was transferring it to writing already. So it really is like, that's where the buy-in and the excitement and the wanting to learn more about it comes from. And that's why we do this too. We love to see those magic moments with kids when their learning's transferring and they feel successful. So, oh, woo woo, shout out Jerry Hansen, an Edgerton grad, 1967. Love it. Oh, and then I did a shout out when you sent me a private message. Sorry, I'm trying to multitask here, and this is being recorded. I love it. Ugh. Okay, technical pieces. I've kind of touched on a lot of these that things for principals, like this is kind of the season of the year where I'm starting to think about the PD calendar. I would highly recommend having that protected literacy block. Even if you can't increase the time, make that your time where you can't do other pullouts. We really need to be looking at that strong tier 1. Have SPED and MLL teams be part of this planning. And other things on here I've already commented on, so I'm going to keep moving over to Jennifer.
Oh, I just wanted to kind of echo what Maura said about that protected literacy block. That's one thing too that we've learned throughout this process. I also know is that your lowest students need to have access to tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. So make sure that you have those lowest kids in your class to be receiving that direct instruction that is at that tier 1 level before you have them pulled out. Really protect that piece of it. We also we really had to look at our literacy block schedule. We switched towards really starting to focus on the diagnostic assessments because that's really giving you the information as to what your students, where their deficits are and where their strengths are. So we've really been looking at that. And again, as I mentioned, we're pulling that SPED Title I, ELL, Reading Core all into that win time with us working on the same learning target. Again, I had mentioned earlier, United South Central, we are doing UFly. We've had great success with UFly. HMH into reading is what we're holding on to for now until we learn more. And again, my staff will graduate next month in May and with the letters training. So we're really looking forward to that. And we just keep looking at it and we continually are changing. It's just a process of continual learning for us.
Jennifer, what diagnostics are you using?
So right now we're using the PAST test is what we're doing for the diagnostics. And then we're using a letters one that, and I can't think of what the name is. I just lost it. We're using a letters diagnostic assessment as well. One thing that we've learned also through our diagnostic assessments is we're seeing some of our 6th grade and 7th grade kids that in some areas are working on skills in the 1st grade level. So we're really still trying to figure out with these diagnostic assessments how we're going to go back in and scoop up these kids that really didn't learn it at the tier 1 level.
We are similarly doing that with our 4th and 5th graders right now that we're hoping not to have to do that going forward. But we use FastBridge, as I mentioned, and then we're using some of the letters spelling screeners. And then during our win time, have intervention and para teachers working with 4th and 5th graders on those phonics and writing interventions. And again, the goal would be that a year, 2 years from now, that would not be needed at that level.
That's what we're hoping as well. And right now we're using STAR. We will be implementing FastBridge next year.
I think the biggest thing to know, and I've touched on this a little bit, and I think like for those of you that say you're subbing in buildings and just are wanting to learn and be around, to be aware of how much work. I think we've really hammered that home, and I'm sure so many of you already know that. You don't need to hear it from us, but the adult emotions are the biggest piece of this, and that it's real. It comes from a place of them caring so much and wanting to do what's best, and that this is hard and they don't want to rush the learning. That was one thing that I had to learn with letters. I'm kind of like a let's get things done, let's get things moving. And teachers really they want to take their time because they want to know the content so that they can do the best job in the classroom. I'm checking as I see some questions come up. Is it the phonics and word reading survey from letters? Yes.
Yes. Yep. That's the one. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mine just escaped me at that point.
Jennifer, I couldn't come with, I know we had talked about it earlier. So good work, Mary. Thank you. Thoughts on implementing STAR and FastBridge? I can't speak to STAR. Can you, Jennifer, or can anyone else
Well,
in the?
one thing that we know is that STAR in grades 3 through 6 is your best indicator to how students are going to do on your MCA tests because it's based upon our state standards. And so with FastBridge for next year, we're going to be for sure having K through 3 do FastBridge. And then we don't know, we might just, I know there's testing fatigue, but we might actually run 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th through both just to see how we're doing because our 3rd through 6th takes the MCAs. And it really has been for us the biggest predictor to how they're going to do on the MCAs. So we kind of hate to leave it at this point. And I'm hoping eventually, because I believe didn't FastBridge buy STAR, that they will combine the two into some type of an assessment. But for now, that's what we're planning on for next year.
We're doing both. Alejandra, what did you want to share?
Hi, I just wanted to share for those that are, I work at Robbinsdale Spanish Immersion and we're piloting STAR Espanol here because we're a FastBridge district. I work in Robbinsdale, but there's no standardized comprehension score for Spanish. So if you're going to test across both program languages, that we're looking at what data that brings us. So because it just doesn't doesn't exist in FastBridge. So in terms of triangulating data, especially in the intermediate grades, having that standardized comp score is really essential, at least on the Spanish side. So that's something that we're looking at and just kind of looking at our overall assessment plan, because that's one complexity that I'm hoping to understand as we grow in our knowledge about the READ Act, because there isn't necessarily tons of guidance on how we do this in a bilingual setting.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate your expertise in that area. We have one DLI program in Roseville, and that I have heard from him as well.
One question we missed here is from Jane. You ask about what have we been doing with the kids that already have the skills, which I think is such a great question. I know for us, this has been just a work in progress all year. We just really have been surprised at the things that we're seeing and the data that we're seeing. For those that are already mastered skills, we are focusing a lot on writing this year as well. That was a huge area, a deficit for us at USC. And we know moving forward that we're going to have to continue to push that piece of it. But right now, that's what those students have been doing, is working on higher level reading and a lot of the writing.
And I would say similar to what we are doing, that is where like the ability grouping or skill need grouping during our win time is where they have more differentiate. Well, it's not really differentiated. It's directly based on what they need during that time. And also like giving extensions for writing and knowing that it is very different as an admin this year, walking into a literacy block to do walkthroughs and seeing so much whole group instruction, and they're all sitting and kind of at first looks like doing the same thing, is a really big shift from what I was used to myself as a teacher and previous years as an admin. I knew guided reading up and down, and this looks different. And what we're learning and seeing is that but this is what they all need. And so it is really looking at the needs of the group as a whole and shifting practices there and knowing that they get those extensions in the writing or the follow-on work. And it has not led to kind of like where I thought, well, we're going to see some behaviors. They're going to be bored. The phonics lessons and the whole group, it's so fast paced that they're getting the repetition and they're engaging and participating in the same way, that it's very structured.
I would agree. I'm seeing the same thing, and kids they're really getting into the phonics lessons, which has been really fascinating to watch them make progress. U-Fly is kind of fun. You have to go through each section and you're checking the boxes as you complete them, and the kids get excited about that piece of it as well. So Again, oh, sorry.
Oh, just a question about intervention. So it's a wide range because so for 5, 6, we're using just words in Roseville, and that's new to us this year. And then for K4, it depends. For some, it's you fly. And then we're doing like for our 3rd, 4th, and even some 5th graders, as I mentioned, that have not had access to this previously, they're going down a level in foundations. So we have intervention teachers and trained paras that are doing that, but I mean, it's a range, just words, you fly, and foundations. All right, sorry, back to you,
No,
Jennifer.
no, that's so important. So talking again about the adult emotions, they're huge. Don't overlook the adult emotions that are going to come your way, especially the time to learn new things, change literacy blocks, and the way we teach content was huge. We all kind of had to go through that piece of it. I think you do find some guilt in having to give up what you used to teach. As you take this journey, you're going to learn that what we were doing was not what was right and best for kids to learn. And that to wrap your brain around that is huge. I think there was a lot of guilt, myself included, for not sticking to what we knew was best for kids. A lot of my senior staff used to teach phonics and do things that were based on the science of reading. And if you've ever listened to Emily Hanford's Sold a Story, you'll know that we abandoned all that to do what we were sold. And so having to go back to that has been a big thing. And there's been a lot of guilt associated with that. I know after about halfway through last year, I'd actually called back to one of the teachers I used to work with and told her I think this student has dyslexia. I mean, it just really is quite a journey that you will embark on. I think one thing too, the resistance to change is huge. I think as teachers, sometimes we wait just to get everything perfect so we can roll it out the following year. And it just isn't that way. And now you're going to kind of have to see that ebb and flow even a little bit more as we learn what we don't know. And I think teachers were concerned that is this just going to be another educational fad that we're going through? The acknowledgement we need to change. It was huge, as I mentioned. Learning new curriculums this year, we have dabbled in UFly. It has taken off well, but I think there comes challenges with learning that new curriculum, and the timepiece is huge. One thing I know I had talked with Michelle and Maura last time is one thing that we've also learned is that reading is rocket science. Is that as you go through this process, your teachers and you will become the expert. You will learn things that you did not know. And so consequently, I kind of have a zero excuses policy now. I don't want to hear teachers say the reason that kids can't read is because their parents didn't read books to them. The bottom line is, yep, reading is rocket science. We're the experts, and it is our time now to step up and to really take that lead on where we are experts.
I love that so much because rather than being deficit minded about our families, it's super empowering to teachers that we can't blame COVID anymore. We can't blame what's happening or not happening at home. Like, you know so much about how to do this incredibly complex act of teaching reading that we are going to focus on what we're doing here. I love that. I also love this like connection and respect for Alejandra as a fountain of knowledge for immersion. This is why MESPA and coming to stuff like this is important to connect with other people and see. So like Jennifer and I are not the only experts in this space. Other people, please share it as well. And hi, Kelsey. Met you at MESPA. I don't know if most sites have pull-out interventionists currently. I would say in the last probably decade, WIN has become a much more normal thing. So we're trying to model it as it's not a pullout for the kids that need more help, that WIN time is for everyone, really focused on what every single kid needs. And so we staff interventionists through some of our Title I funding, but all staff are meeting with small groups of kids at that time. I mean, I wish I was like super Zoom savvy and could create a little poll on here to see, and we could share how many of our sites. But if people want to throw it in the chat of how many intervention, or is that a common thing, or am I speaking to something that most sites don't have? Because then that's problematic too. But I would say that in Roseville, not all, but most schools have a reading intervention teacher. Ugh.
One thing that got me thinking as well with Alejandra's comments is our MLLs at United South Central. We have a really great ELL program, but one thing we also did, because we have such a strong partnership with Lexia, is we have Lexia English, and that's another program that students can utilize as they're learning the English language. It's really been kind of fascinating to watch these kids use this program, and that's something else you can ask Katie Lewis about. We actually had piloted it for Lexia, and done some feedback for them, and now this year we're actually spending a year using it. So something else to check out.
Well, I'm going to go back to a question from Mary. Currently at Edgerton, we do group students for win time across grade level. And at 3 and 4 and a few 4 and 5, we're grouping multi-grade based on needs. And that's due to our progress monitoring and PLCs reviewing data several times a year. But we do. The other thing we've done that I would say this has been highly successful is we've taken, when we group our kids, the students with the highest need are staying in the classroom with the classroom teacher, rather than, it's kind of that unfortunate stereotype that kids with the highest needs are put into the hall with sometimes someone with the least amount of training. We're taking our kids that have the most room for growth, staying with the classroom teacher during WIN, and the other groups moving around. And that's something I would want to replicate and do more of next year. We're seeing from our winter to spring screening data, that's where the most growth is happening, and that's where it was needed. So that's, sample size of 1 here, but working. What a question. We're school-wide Title I. So actually, I'm using the word intervention teacher because that's what we had forever. But if you are, this is a super technical piece, intervention staff can only be used if you're a targeted services site, and Edgerton is school-wide. So actually it's our literacy lead who is doing this, but in the past it had been an intervention teacher.
So at USC, we're a Title I, school-wide Title I. So that's a big piece of this pie for students learning there too. And that whole team, including Title I paras, are trained now in letters.
Yeah. And for those that don't, my first thought is that if you don't have the staff to do really intentional grouping, it kind of goes back to, makes me think about Jane's question from earlier of, well, then what are you going to do with the kids that already know it? Because when you are doing this whole group tier 1 core instruction for much longer than we've been used to in schools, you still need that other time where it is differentiated to their skills and needs. I would need to know, Kelsey, we could talk more about that, about like, what would that look like in a schedule and how would that be done? And the other thing I know Jennifer and I have talked about is, like, again, shifting that mindset of the kids that need reading development need to go somewhere else for it to happen. That shifting for all of us doing this really hard learning together, it's such a culture builder and helps with that. These are all our kids. I'm not, when my kid is struggling in my class, that's not someone else's problem to solve. I want a team to help me, and we're going to talk about this, but I'm going to keep them in the room, and this is on us and me to solve this rather than you go somewhere else to fix the kid.
Yeah, that was huge for us as well. Like I said, your lowest kids should have the most access to all 3 tiers of instruction. So again, that was just a whole nother different way of looking at it.
As I'm looking, we've got 10 or 9 minutes left here. Please keep putting questions in the chat. This is super helpful. I feel like these are the pieces I have really touched on this. If you are just starting some of the science and reading PD, the time. If you do letters, really do not skim over the bridge to practice. That is the part of letters that makes the work meaningful because it's about kids in your building. And that's what this is really about, is these are children. And that part is too important to skim over. I also wish I would have been much more clear on what we are doing already that does align with the science of reading and what we are going to change and why. Like, I should have had a T chart in the beginning of this year. I can make one next year. We're in the process now this summer of redesigning our report card or progress reports. That was something that we could have avoided as a district. That was really frustrating for staff when they didn't align with what we were doing anymore. So something to think about.
All right. So yes, I would agree with what Maura said as well. The intensive training program. One thing to remember is letters is not a curriculum, and that is the why to the how. So once you learn that why, then you jump to that how are we going to implement the knowledge that we learn, and that's a big piece of this puzzle. Be very, very patient with yourself. Give yourself grace as you go through this process. We're still going through it every day, learning to do what is best for kids. I'm constantly reminding adults, hey, this isn't about us. We have to continue to do this for the kids. What I wish I would have known is the background in foundational reading and pedagogical skills. We kind of learned that we really need to increase that piece of it through what we've learned through the why and implement it into the how. The structured and protected literacy blocks, as we talked earlier, the big importance of that. The phonics curriculum, and I kind of wanted to touch briefly on that phonics, our curriculum and our continuum we've developed. I'm really pushing my staff with our UFly specifically, to tell them in order for it to be equitable, everybody has to be doing the same slides. Everything needs to look the same. We need to make sure our timing is right so that we are creating that equity for kids, which is just so, so, so important. We are also looking at how are we going to align our new learnings with our report card and our IEP progress reports, because it does change. It just absolutely changes how you look and how you operate as a system.
One question about suggestions on pacing for letters. My input would be 2 years. That 3 is too long, there's too much time between, and that 1 is too fast, that it's so much content that people really need time to digest it, attend the modules, do the bridge to practice, really practice what they're doing during the day. So I do think 2 years is the right amount of time. What would you say?
I would agree on the 2 years as well. I know somebody had asked earlier in the chat about possibly doing year 1 and year 2 together. I would not recommend that. Year 1's actually the first half of the year for year 1 is very, very, very extremely intensive. Give yourself the time and the grace to learn the things you need to do and pace it. You'll appreciate that in the long run.
Yeah. And Kelsey, I will definitely follow up with you. That's the summer work. I think like the simplest example is the difference between uppercase and lowercase and when they're taught in kindergarten and how kindergarten teachers were supposed to check those off on the fall progress report in Roseville. And they're like, we haven't done it yet. And now, so we're assessing them and sharing this with families yet, and we haven't done this direct instruction. So little things like that. I think for IEP goals, like again, thinking about using the pillars of literacy and talking about which piece they're working on based on needs rather than some of the standard ones that had been done. Jennifer, do you have a better specific example? That was not very eloquent of me.
No, I would agree. The 5 pillars of literacy have been big. Yes.
And just like making sure goals are specific about phonics or phonemic awareness. I think that was the one thing that I really learned, was not just for myself, but for many staff, that those two were getting convoluted and that we really needed to separate them. And especially for students with an IEP, that has caught some of their gaps in what was preventing them from making progress. And so really like having two separate goals, or even like if it's a literacy goal, then they have a phonics objective and also a phonemic awareness objective.
I would agree. We were seeing a lot of goals that were just focused on like fluency, real broader things. And
Yeah.
it's like, if they can't read, don't put a fluency goal in there because we're not
Right.
worried about fluency. We're worrying about decoding, encoding, all of those things.
Mhm.
So those are, yeah, very, very important to get that drilled down to those specifics.
Yeah. All right. I think that feel free to take yourself off mute if you have a last minute question or anything. I really appreciate the chat engagement today. That helps know
Yeah.
where we are. And I'm still looking at
Please don't hesitate to reach out with questions or concerns. I know I certainly don't have it all. We have just been immersed in this for 2 years, and this is where we're at, and we're learning something new every single day.
yeah. And I like that. I know I didn't really address the timeline. It says it was updated, but it's the same one that I saw a month ago. Just do something with training staff. That's the biggest thing right now and be aware that the timeline keeps changing.
Do you have
I'll put it. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm sorry, Mara. Do you have recommendations? I had to pop on a little late this morning, so I apologize if you've shared this, but did you share recommendations on where to start if you are kind of in that beginning stages with the structured literacy parts is what I'm kind of thinking you're referring to.
Where to start for me would be with the adult learning. So them doing some reading or podcasts so they understand why the shift is needed. I would start there, and then I would go into one of the recommended PDs with teachers if that hasn't been started with your team yet.
I would agree. You really got to get these teachers to know the why. I always think we do better when we know the why at doing the how. So really get those teachers into why this is important.
Thank you.
Hi, Katie. I saw a llama sticker on the ground last week and thought of you. Good to see you.
I believe I will always be associated with llamas for here forever and ever and ever.
Yes,
Good
you
to
will.
see
That's
you
not a
too.
bad thing. And if you don't know what we're talking about, everyone, you need to come to the MESPA Institute next year. How do we access the recording? I believe, Christine, can you answer that? Or I think Michelle said they would be sent out, post it in the MESPA weekly.
We will have it available on the website next week.
Okay, awesome. And I did just put the slides in, and reach out with any other questions. This is like, we're talking about, or I talked about teacher emotions a lot. It's principal emotions too. This is hard.
Absolutely.
It's a lot of learning for us. It's a lot of change. Like we need each other in this work as well. So
Yeah, absolutely. I know when we went through it, I just felt very alone at times, and just praying I was doing the right thing. This was even before the READ Act came out. And I mean, you kind of got to lean on the people that can support you to get you through this. It's not always pleasant, but yeah, as long as you're making gains, it's very well worth it in the end.
all right. Well, I hope everyone has a great Tuesday, and I will stay on for a few more minutes if there's any last minute questions, and then I'm starting to get some texts about being needed elsewhere.